What if that capybara sitting half submerged in water is not giving up on life at all? What if the face the internet keeps turning into a joke is actually one of the most misunderstood animal expressions online? You've seen it. Eyes half closed, body barely moving, zero urgency. It looks lazy, it looks blank, it looks like the animal has completely checked out, but that's exactly where the mistake begins. Because some of what looks like surrender in a capybara is actually perfect biological logic, and it changes the whole picture. You know the image already. A capybara sitting in water so still it almost looks unreal. Eyes half closed, body barely moving, no urgency, no visible reaction. It looks like the animal has completely given up on the day, or maybe unlocked some impossible level of inner peace that the rest of us will never reach. That is exactly why people keep sharing it. It feels funny because it looks so extreme, so detached, so blank, so weirdly done with everything. And the internet has named that feeling 100 different ways. Lazy, checked out, zen, emotionally unavailable, living the dream, quiet quitting life. Different joke, same assumption. There cannot be much going on in there. If an animal looks that still, that unbothered, that disconnected from everything around it, most people immediately read it as emptiness. That's the mistake. Because what you're actually looking at is not just a strange expression. You are looking at a very human habit of misreading calm. We are wired to trust movement, reaction, and visible intensity. If something is alert in a loud way, we assume it is fully engaged. If something is quiet, slow, and unreadable, we assume the opposite. So when a capybara sits there like that, people do not just see stillness. They project absence onto it. And that matters, because this whole video starts there. If an animal does not perform life in the way your brain expects, you call it blank before you ever ask what its body might actually be doing. But that image everyone treats like a joke may be one of the most biologically sensible things a capybara does. Picture the capybara everyone shares online, half submerged in water, eyes barely open, face unreadable, looking like it has no deadlines, no stress, and honestly, no opinion about anything. And that image gets interpreted the same way over and over: lazy, checked out, totally done with life. Like this animal has found some weird floating version of giving up and decided to live there permanently. But here's the truth. Water is not a joke to a capybara. It's regulation. What looks passive to you is often one of the most functional states its body can be in. Water helps cool the body down. It creates cover. It gives the animal a faster way to feel safe. It lowers physical strain. It makes the outside world easier to tolerate. So when a capybara slides into water and goes still, that is not necessarily an animal leaving life. A lot of the time, it is an animal moving closer to the conditions its body was designed to handle well. That is the part people miss. Humans look at a capybara sitting quietly in water and see a spa, a bath, a mood, a punchline. But from the capybara's side, water is not just comfort, it is a more stable state. It is a place where heat, exposure, and pressure can all drop at the same time. In other words, what feels funny to watch can be deeply sensible to live. And this is where it gets interesting. That half-floating, half-unbothered look is not the visual language of an animal shutting down. It may be the visual language of an animal becoming easier inside its own body. What looks like laziness may actually be one of the moments the capybara is making the most biological sense. And once you see that, their slow pace starts making a lot more sense too. Be honest. If an animal moves slowly, reacts slowly, and spends long stretches doing almost nothing, what do you assume? Most people assume the same thing. Not much going on, not very sharp, maybe peaceful, sure, but not exactly impressive. We are so used to reading speed as awareness that slowness starts to look like a lack of life instead of a different way of managing it. But here's the truth. A lot of animals are not built to impress your nervous system. They are built to survive their own. And that changes how capybaras make sense. Their pace is not random. It fits a body that does better with steadiness than frenzy, with lower risk movement than constant reaction, with conserving energy instead of burning it to look alert every second. A capybara does not need to move like panic is intelligence. It needs to move in ways that reduce strain, manage heat, and keep the body inside a rhythm it can actually sustain. That is where humans get it wrong. We live inside urgency. We reward fast replies, fast movement, fast thinking, fast everything. So when we look at an animal that does not perform that kind of speed, we mistake it for dullness. We call it lazy because it is not staging its awareness in a way we instantly recognize. But slowness is not always a failure. Sometimes it is fit. And that may be why capybaras hit people so strangely. Because once you stop reading them as broken, they start looking less like a joke and more like a creature that wastes almost nothing. And if they were truly detached from the world, one thing would make a lot less sense: how much they depend on the group. Think about the kinds of spaces that exhaust you fastest. Too much noise, too much movement, too many things happening at once, a room that never settles, a world that keeps pushing your body to react before it has even finished processing the last thing. Now, imagine living inside that kind of pressure when your whole system works best in the opposite direction. That is where capybaras start to make more sense. What looks like peace is not always peace in the romantic way people imagine it. Sometimes it is regulation. Sometimes it is a body trying very hard not to do more than it has to. Capybaras make sense in steadier environments, predictable rhythms, familiar spaces, and low conflict conditions. They do not look built for constant disruption. They look built for a world that does not keep yanking at their nervous system every few seconds. And that matters, because when a capybara goes still, lowers its intensity, or seems to disappear into quiet, people often read that as emotional absence, like it checked out, like it gave up. But that may be the mistake. The behavior can be less about leaving life and more about staying within a state the body can safely hold. Humans do this all the time with calm animals. We moralize them. We call them boring, empty, unambitious, but sometimes what you are really looking at is a nervous system protecting itself from overload in the cleanest way it knows how. Not dramatic, not loud, just careful. That is part of why capybaras feel strangely comforting once you understand them. They do not just look relaxed. They look like creatures designed to avoid unnecessary friction. And once that clicks, the whole image changes. You thought you were looking at an animal that had given up on life. By now, you can probably feel the opposite. Picture a capybara sitting in the middle of a group. It is barely moving, barely reacting, barely signaling anything a human would normally read as warmth. And that is exactly why so many people misread it. The animal looks present, but emotionally miles away. But that is not the same thing as being alone. Here's the truth. Quiet presence is not social absence. Capybaras are group animals, and a lot of what makes them make sense only makes sense inside steady company. Familiar bodies nearby, shared safety, shared space, shared rhythm, not constant performance, not loud reassurance, just a low friction kind of togetherness that helps the whole group stay regulated. From a human point of view, bonding is easy to recognize when it is expressive, when it is enthusiastic, when it announces itself. That is the mistake. All right, capybara social life does not usually advertise itself that way. It can look flat when it is actually stable. It can look emotionally distant when it is actually coordinated, familiar, and safe. That matters more than people realize. Because once you stop demanding human-style signals, the picture changes. The capybara sitting quietly beside others is not failing to connect. It may be doing exactly what connection looks like for an animal built around calm group living. Not dramatic attachment, not theatrical affection, just closeness without strain. And this is where the meme starts to fall apart. The same animal people call blank or detached may actually be most itself when it is settled near others, with no need to prove anything. That kind of bond is easy to miss because it does not perform for you. But not all connection announces itself. If this is changing the way you see capybaras, like and subscribe. Too many people still laugh at behaviors they have never really learned how to read. The problem was never the capybara. It was the way we kept reading calm as absence, stillness as emptiness, water as laziness, slowness as dullness, quiet company as detachment. One animal over and over, filtered through a human bias that trusts visible intensity too much. Think about what that really means. If something moves fast, reacts fast, signals constantly, our brains register it as engaged, as alert, as intelligent. But if something stays still, regulates quietly, and does not perform its inner state for us, we start acting as if nothing is there. That is the mistake. A capybara does not advertise awareness in the way human attention has been trained to notice. It does not need to. What looks uneventful from the outside may actually be an animal making continuous appropriate choices about comfort, exposure, energy, the group safety, and environmental fit. Not flashy choices, just correct ones. And this is where it gets interesting. Maybe we only call something nothing when we do not know how to read it. Maybe the emptiness was never in the animal at all. Maybe it was in the gap between what it was communicating and what we were equipped to recognize. Because once you step back, the pattern becomes hard to miss. The water was not a joke. The slowness was not failure. The calm was not disconnection. The low drama was not low intelligence. It was all part of a body and a mind working in the style they were built for. So here is the shift. Stop looking for flash. Start looking for fit. Stop looking for performance. Start looking for regulation. And once you stop asking why capybaras seem to do so little, you start seeing how much they have been doing all along. Earlier, that capybara in the water looked like it had given up on life. Half submerged, barely moving, eyes half closed, it felt like the perfect image of an animal that had checked out. But by now, you can probably see the mistake in that reading. What looked like laziness was adaptation. What looked like emptiness was regulation. What looked like detachment was a quieter kind of connection. The gap was never in the animal itself. It was in the way we tend to read calm when it does not look like energy we recognize. That is really what this whole video comes down to. We are quick to trust speed, expression, noise, and obvious reaction. We treat visible intensity like proof of life, and when an animal moves through the world with less display, less urgency, and less wasted motion, we risk calling it blank when it is actually perfectly tuned. The capybara was never strange for being calm. It only looks strange inside a culture that confuses stillness with nothingness. Sometimes the quietest animal in the room isn't doing less, it's just wasting less.